Hey guys, this is Urizi. I'm back. I'm sorry I've been gone for a while. This is season 2 of What If Naruto Was the Son of Apollo and also part 9 of the series. The summer after the quest for Artemis, Naruto has his hands full with guilt, concern and frustration. When Bianca's strange illness takes a turn for the worse, a quest is started. A relationship is strained, a hero returns, and the labyrinth is found. Join Naruto as he begins his quest for the cure and the others dive into the labyrinth. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and also check the author in the description if you liked the story. I don't want to make you wait any longer, so let's start. Chapter 4. Can you tell me how this is my fault again? Percy asked in annoyance as he and Annabeth examined the abandoned ruins that they had fallen into. The blonde girl turned and fixed him with a glare, putting her hands on her hips as she did so. You pushed me down here, seaweed brain. Athena's daughter accused. And instead of doing what a sane person would do and going to get help, you fell down after me. Hey, you're the one that told me to look over your shoulder. What else was I supposed to do? Use mirrors? Defended the son of Poseidon before he looked up at the hole they fell through. Maybe we could climb back up. Wouldn't you like to know what this place is first? Annabeth asked as she turned back to the wall and ran her hand over the stone. Percy scratched the back of his head while answering, not really, no. I'd rather be back at the cabins talking to Tyson. You did that yesterday, didn't you? Annabeth asked, still running her fingers over the stone before finding an engraving, what the gods above. Geez, and she said Talia spent too much time around Naruto? Percy silently joked as he turned and looked at what she found. Carved into the stone was a thick triangle, one that he recognized as the Greek symbol of Delta, okay, one that he was forced to recognize after the quest for Artemis by Naruto. Percy shuddered as he tried to repress the thought of studying with Naruto. The blonde demigod had made good work on teaching Percy everything he should have already had memorized by now, and had joked that if Percy ever had an important test, Naruto would always be willing to help. Percy made sure never to tell his mother about Naruto's miracle teaching method. The constant writing of names to where they belonged in myth history made his hand ache at the memory. Writing it in both Greek and English. The horror. Do you know what this is? Annabeth asked him. The raven-haired son of Poseidon looked at her with a face that said, duh. The symbol for Delta, he replied easily. The gray-eyed blonde gave him a look of surprise that he wasn't sure if he should have been insulted by or not. Well, it's that, but more importantly it's the symbol for Deadless, explained Annabeth as her eyes glistened in excitement. Percy, we're inside of the labyrinth. The labyrinth? Percy repeated after a moment of thought, you mean that place that Minos had built for the Minotaur, Pasiphae's son? Who are you and what have you done with Percy? Annabeth asked with false accusation as a smile threatened to break through her joking facade. Percy crossed his arms and frowned at his friend. I'll have you know, Annabeth Chase, that I do have a brain, retorted the raven-haired teen. Annabeth snorted and stifled a giggle, making Percy scowl at her. He turned and went back to the hole, glaring up at it while mumbling to himself about not being stupid and friends that took jokes too far sometimes. Annabeth rolled her eyes and went back to running her hands over the stone. Oh, come on, Percy. You know I'm just kidding. You've been hanging out with Talia too much, Percy grumbled as he started to check the wall for loose stones. Maybe if we pry one loose. The path they were in suddenly shook, causing the two teens to stumble backwards into each other. With a grunt, Percy pushed himself back to his feet before offering Annabeth a hand up. The daughter of Athena immediately went to the wall and pressed her ear against it, ignoring her friend as he caught sight of something beyond her. This is amazing, she quietly exclaimed. Turning to Percy, she waved him over. Percy, you have to come listen to this. It sounds like something is moving the stones. Annabeth, something isn't moving the stones, Percy said, pointing at the still shifting walls in front of them. The stones are moving themselves. That's so awesome. Annabeth exclaimed, her urge to examine the once lost maze rising to new levels. Sure it is, Percy said with a small smile, amused at her excitement, before grabbing the excited girl's shoulder. Come on. We have to go and tell Chiron about this. But, I suppose you're right, the slightly disappointed girl sighed out. She turned her head to the hole. Did you hear that? Percy strained his ears before recalling something Naruto had taught him. Talia and the D'Angelos, The Big Three's kids trained well together, who knew? Taking a deep breath and going to his center, Percy muted out the world around him. Naruto had taught the 4 children of the Big Three how to find their centers in case they felt like they were going to lose control of their abilities. While Percy didn't know what Nico or Bianca's abilities were, he knew that if either he or Talia lost control of themselves, someone would be in a world of hurt. Currently, Percy felt like he was floating in the ocean, his body had relaxed and faintly he heard someone calling his name. It sounded a lot like, "That's Grover!" Percy exclaimed, cupping his mouth and shouting up the hole, "Down here! We're down here!" A few seconds ticked by and Grover was above them with a tall curly-haired teen with a single blue eye in the center of his face standing behind him. Tyson, the dimmer-than-average teenage Cyclops, smiled down at his half-brother, Percy. "Annabeth, Percy." Grover sighed in relief, "Thank Pan you're both okay. I'll pull you up." "How are you going to do that?" "It's a 8-foot drop," Percy asked, getting a look of bewilderment from Annabeth. Rubbing the back of his neck, Percy sheepishly replied, "Naruto, taught me the way he learned how to measure distances." "The hard way," added the demigod as he recalled Naruto throwing Percy into the ocean from various heights with Blackjack's help. Percy still felt a little betrayed at the way his steed had laughed at him. Then again, he also felt sorry for Naruto, who had tried to teach the other 3, only for Zeus to stop him from teaching the D'Angelos with a very close meeting with a lightning bolt and Talia to threaten him with a pain beyond imaginable in a place no man would ever recover from if he even tried to get her on the Pegasus's back. Percy had to hand it to Naruto, the blonde had guts to shrug a threat like that off. Then again, I'm just not used to it, Percy thought as he looked up at Annabeth as she was pulled out of the labyrinth. Percy's eyes glazed over when he accidentally stared at the girl's jean-covered rear, not that he was aware of it. He was snapped out of it when Grover said, "All right, your turn, Percy." "Yeah, sure," Percy mumbled, still a little dazed from the sight he just took in, jumping up to grab his friend's hand. Grover and Tyson pulled the teen out of the ground. Once he was back in the small cave he had entered through, Percy smiled at his half-brother and friend, "Thanks guys, for coming so quickly." "Quickly?" Grover repeated in confusion while Tyson just beamed at his brother. Percy looked down at the hole and then around the cave, nearly having a heart attack when Annabeth's saber-toothed Washington growled at him when his gaze went over to his teammate. The blonde girl grinned and patted her large cat on the head. "Good boy, Wash," she praised. "Helping them find us." Percy's eye twitched as he watched the cat turn into a happy puppy at the side of his owner. Washington hated him, probably because of how negatively Annabeth had reacted to him stealing her hat when they had first met, and had taken to trying to trip him up whenever he wanted to hang out with Annabeth last winter. What made it worse, Annabeth refused to believe that the cat was out to get him. She just thought that he was being mean because he was a dog person, which was an ironic claim considering one of the first monsters that had tried to kill him was a hellhound and afterwards there was an incident with Chimera disguised as a chihuahua. "Percy," Grover started, snapping the teen from his one-sided staring contest with Annabeth's saber-tooth, "we've been looking for you for 2 hours." "What?" Annabeth and Percy questioned as one, equal amounts of surprise on their faces. They looked at each other before looking back at the concerned satyr. "Grover, that can't be right," Annabeth said as she stopped lathering her cat with attention, "we were down there for maybe 10 minutes at most." "It was 2 hours," Grover said confidently. He should know, he was hypothesizing what horrible events could have happened to them while they searched. Tyson nodded, his curly locks bobbing with his head as his single eye turned into one full of worry. "Yeah, me and Grover have been to the lake, the big hill, and searched most of the forest," the Cyclops added. "I even got stuck in the entrance for a few minutes before Wash came and pushed me through." Percy and Annabeth shared another look before the son of Poseidon came up with a hypothesis, "Time moves slower, like in the Lotus Hotel?" "That could be it," Annabeth said before looking to Grover, "we have to tell Chiron about this." The satyr nodded in agreement, turning around and squeezing through the gap. Tyson followed with a small push from Washington, the large cat following after him. Annabeth went next, and Percy followed after her. This was starting to look like it was going to be another one of those summers, one that could mean the end of the camp. Realizing this, his mind went back to Talia and Naruto and wondered how their mysterious quest was going. A few hours prior, on a highway in the middle of Nevada, Naruto was pressing himself against the back of a black SUV while one of his old friends, and the term is used loosely mind you, took shots at him with a handgun, scaring the poor family within the vehicle. He heard the skeleton step on broken glass in approach and the sound of a clip falling to the ground. This reminds me of that film you and Zeus girl watched, Helios idly commented, you know, the one with that huge muscle guy who sounds German. What was it called? Obliterator. No wait, Eliminator. You're really not helping right now, Naruto silently replied with a frown as he scanned the area before finding one of his stray arrows just a bit away from him. Pushing himself to his feet, Naruto dashed for the arrow, making the skeleton hurry after him. A car was approaching and about to merge in the other lane to avoid the gunman, consequently causing the arrow to be shattered. Naruto pressed himself to run faster, diving for his arrow just as the car began to merge. Hirishin, Naruto announced as soon as his fingers touched the arrowhead. The nearest point he could think of was at Talia's side, which is where he ended up. Landing in the car and ignoring Talia's gasp at his current state, Naruto panted before lifting his hand and grinning when he held the arrow within it. Slamming on the brake and tearing his seal off the accelerator with his other foot, Naruto waited until he came to a complete stop before looking at Talia. Giving her a small apologetic smile, Naruto said, "Be right back." Wait dash. But he didn't. Naruto once more teleported with the hood of the Peterbilt in mind. He had left that skeleton unsupervised and two humans in a wrecked SUV at its mercy. That and he could hear honking horns and gunshots. Reappearing on top of the dreaded Peterbilt, Naruto pulled his bow out and prepared the arrow he had obtained. Flicking the knock, there was a brief hum before the arrowhead whirred and unfolded, turning into a blade-like arrowhead that was about 2 inches in width. Naruto whistled sharply, gaining the attention of the skeleton, before releasing his arrow. The skeleton's head was severed from its neck and much to his ire the monster didn't dissolve into a pile of dust. It did get hit by a swerving car, though, sending its bones across the interstate. Come to think of it, none of the other skeletons dissolved into gold dust either. With a twitching eye, Naruto grumbled and asked, "What does it take to kill you guys?" Sighing, he dropped from the hood of the Peterbilt cab, grunting as he landed on the ground. He jogged over to the SUV and knocked on the driver's window, peering in before he asked, "Hello? Anyone home?" "Sorry I hit your car, wasn't exactly my fault, but you know." The driver's door opened and after he stepped back, Naruto had to do a double take at who stepped out. His mouth popped open before he dropped his bow, pointing at the man in shock, "Holy shit, you're Tristan McLean." Although concerned for the teen's safety, Tristan couldn't fight down his amusement. "Yes, are you ALRI-? Oh shit," Naruto said as his eyes widened and his hands went to his head, "I just hit Tristan McLean's SUV. His fan base is going to kill me. I'm just saying that he's starting to drive me up the walls," a displeased Talia said as she sat in the car with her arms crossed, glaring at the empty driver's seat. Around her left wrist was Q in his bracelet mode. Since she lacked the ability to lend him chakra, he couldn't materialize in his spiritual form. And now he was stuck listening to his partner's chosen mate, or girlfriend as the kid insisted, complain about the kid's suicidal/stupid plans. "Wow, you're slow on the uptake," Q commented, getting a glare from the daughter of Zeus. "It's a curse of the Uzumaki to be as crazy as possible when in battle." A pregnant Mito, the kid's great-grand cousin or something, once dove headfirst into battle when she heard her beloved husband had been scratched by a kunai. And let's not forget the kid's mother. Talk about a nut job, now she's a woman I would rather be allied with than against. "What was his mom like?" Talia asked, fishing for information her secretive boyfriend refused to share. Whenever she asked him about it, he would smile and say that she would eventually find out. What irked her even more was that she had asked it in front of the D'Angelos and Percy, both of who were given knowing looks from her blonde boyfriend, which meant that they knew something she didn't. "Oh, no you don't," Q chastised with an audible frown in his voice. "The kid will tell you about Kushina in due time. All I will say is that he got his stupid suicidal plans and most of his personality from her." Talia frowned, trying to think of what Naruto's mother looked like. She had to be beautiful. Apollo wouldn't have had a child with someone, even if he was amnesiac, who wasn't, let alone marry them. And even that had to mean she was beautiful. From what she could get out of the spirit within her boyfriend's weapon, she was feisty and bad at planning in the long term, coming up with crazy battle plans on the fly. The raven-haired punk of a demigoddess growled and closed her eyes in frustration. "Ugh, I'm so sick of thinking about Whisker's past," Talia grumbled to herself. Q chuckled and she shifted a glare down to the gleaming red ruby on her wrist. A black slit appeared across the gem, looking up at her almost gleefully. "Then perhaps you should stop thinking about it and just beat the answers out of him," Q suggested. Talia's mouth curled up in a smile as she replied, "That is tempting." Before Q could say another thing on the subject, her door had been pulled open and Naruto peered in. Unbuckled, Taliah was free to jump out of her seat, throwing her arms around his neck and hugging him. Naruto grinned as he hugged the girl back, standing upright as he did so and consequently pulling her out of the challenger as he did so. Putting Taliah back on the ground, the girl immediately punched him in the arm. "You're a god's damned lunatic," scolded the girl. "You just had to go and do something crazy like jump out of the car while it was still moving. In case you haven't noticed, Whiskers, I can't drive." Sorry, apologized the blonde teen as he rubbed his arm. He then gestured to his right and her left, to the father and daughter he had pulled from their wrecked car, and continued, "Taliah Grace, meet Tristan and Piper McLean." Taliah gaped as she stared at the heartthrob movie star, a faint blush coming over her cheeks before shaking herself out of her daze and looking at the girl next to him. Furrowing her brows, she looked at Naruto questionably. The blonde had a grim smile on his face and nodded, making her cover her eyes before asking, "Do they know?" "Not exactly," sheepishly admitted the blonde, turning his girlfriend around and whispering into her ear, "Told them that we're secret agents." Tristan seemed to buy it a little too eagerly. "Don't think he's the spiritual type, so let's just keep our real purpose out here on the down low." "A secret agent? That's the best you could come up with?" Taliah hissed, slapping him in the arm once more. Naruto winced and rubbed his arm. That was going to bruise if she kept hitting him in the same spot. "Dad's the god of truths and I'm the reincarnation of the god of oaths. I don't lie well, the only time I do is when I leave things out and it's really obvious when I do that," he admitted before realizing his slip and the slight widening of eyes Taliah gave him. Her eyes narrowed and a brief flicker of lightning danced across them that made Naruto's Adam's apple bounce as he swallowed. "We're having a long talk after we get to wherever we're going," Taliah snapped aloud before smiling at the father and daughter. "So, hi." "Hello Taliah," Tristan greeted with a smile and a nod that would melt hearts. "Thanks for letting us hitch a ride with you." Taliah sent another look to her boyfriend. Naruto sheepishly laughed. "I kind of hit and wrecked their car." "A long talk," Taliah reiterated, making Naruto nervously chuckle. She looked back to the movie star and his daughter before sighing, "All right, let me move my bag first." Once everyone was situated, Naruto slid his seat back in front of Taliah, who gave him another glare. He gave her an apologetic glance, but he and Tristan were too tall to comfortably sit in the back of the sports car. Tristan looked at the rear window and his eyes widened when he realized it was shattered. "You weren't kidding when you said it was a dangerous job," Tristan mumbled before looking at Piper. "You all set, Pipes?" "Dad," Piper groaned in embarrassment as the handsome blonde and his equally beautiful partner laughed at her nickname. Tristan smiled and sat forward before looking at the blonde driver. "So what brings two secret agents, teenage ones at that, to Nevada's highway?" he asked. Naruto grinned back at him. "Secret mission, what else?" "Of course," the movie star chuckled out. The radio blared to life as the tires squealed, which was quickly turned down by the blonde driver. He smiled apologetically to the amused Tristan, who waved it off. The four sat in silence, save for the youth's pretty handsome awkward playing in the background, before Piper, a little curious, asked, "So, how old are you, Naruto?" Taliah arched a brow and a smirk tugged at her lips when the blonde easily replied, 17. 17? And you work for the government? Piper asked with her brow furrowed. Naruto groaned inwardly while Taliah's smirk became more prominent. The girl was smart. Hopefully she was another Annabeth. "Yes," Naruto said uncomfortably, shifting in his seat. A strange feeling was coming over him, a lot like when that girl drew, "Oh dear gods no." Taking a deep breath, Naruto quickly started to expel chakra through his body in quick pulses. The last thing he needed was for this apparent daughter of Aphrodite to charm speak him into telling her every single one of his dirty little secrets. Last thing he needed to do was tell his girlfriend about that time in tea country. "Okay," Piper replied, unconvinced, "so where are you going?" "California," Naruto replied. It was a reasonable destination considering where they were and who they were with. "Why?" Piper asked. Naruto behind him briefly to look at the girl before looking forward once again, merging around another car. "Trying to get a cover job," he answered, trying at least to stick with his first lie. "What as?" pressed the young and unaware demigoddess. Taliah's smirk had turned into a full-out grin and she was trying oh so hard not to laugh as her boyfriend's shoulders tensed. A sign of his annoyance at the way the curious girl was trying to pick apart his earlier statements. "An actor," Naruto answered, his left hand gripping the will tight enough that he was cracking the plastic underneath the leather cover. Thankfully his rescue came in the form of the girl's father. An actor? That's not going to be an easy cover, you know, Tristan replied, before adding, unless you have the right connections. Huh, what a shame, Talia added in obviously false disappointment. And he doesn't have any of those. Yes, it is a shame, Naruto said through gritted teeth, looking at the mirror and meeting his amused girlfriend's eyes. He should have known that she'd be against him in this. This had to be payback for his game of chicken earlier. I could help if you like, Tristan added, nearly making Naruto lose control as his surprising statement made the blonde choke on air. You could? Both Talia and Naruto questioned in equal amounts of shock. The blockbuster star nodded. Sure, why not? Tristan said with a shrug, be nice to have a friend in the business. And there's this script I was sent from a friend of mine, and they're looking for a blonde teenager like yourself. The working title is Theseus. Theseus, Naruto repeated as his brows furrowed, like the son of Poseidon, Theseus? That's exactly right, Tristan confirmed with a nod, ignoring the what the fuck look Talia had donned. The actor continued, they wanted me to play the villain, King Minos, and I said I would if they could find the guy they were looking for. What's the story? Another ancient Greek remake? Naruto asked. Tristan shook his head. No, they wanted to go another route, the movie star replied as the girls in the back listened to him, a modernization of the story with a happy ending for Theseus and Phaedra, who is replacing Ariadne. Take the job. Helios ordered, happy ending for the win. How do you even know what that is? Naruto asked internally while Tristan went into the details of the story. An alternate futuristic utopia ruled by the tyrannical king, Minos, who had a monster and a prison that acted as though it was alive. A young fisherman, Theseus, would be sent along with 11 others to the prison and would have to survive traps as well as evade the monster. There was a side love story that made Talia's jaw clench. Eventually there would be a face-off between the Minotaur and Theseus, and by that time, Naruto was sold. Alright, so where are auditions taking place? He asked, not aware of the way Talia was glaring at him. Well, they're still in development, but you could drop us off at the producer's office, Tristan said. Mr. Liar, who's the head of the production company, is a pretty nice guy and actually kicked off my acting career after his brother's wife saw my photo on his desk. Really, what's the production company? Naruto inquired curiously. Tristan looked to the west with a small smile on his face before he said two words that made Naruto and Talia groan, Sunrise Films. Chapter 5. Around the time Grover, Tyson and Washington were pulling Percy and Annabeth out of the labyrinth, Naruto was internally groaning as he drove into the parking lot for San Francisco's Sunrise Films production company. Piper had managed to call him out on his secret agent lie, much to Talia's amusement, and so he was forced to tell another half-lie. He had no idea what the scarred men had wanted from them, which was true. He wasn't sure if they were sent to kill them or capture them, and he got his strength and agility from his summer camp, not government facilities. Tristan, who was just playing along with the blonde for the sake of his daughter, said he had no hard feelings about it so long as the blonde agreed to meet with the producer for the film. Both Naruto and Talia reluctantly complied with the request, leading them to the present. Getting out of his car with a sigh, Naruto wondered where he had gone wrong on the quest to end up outside one of his dad's domain doorsteps. Maybe he should have used those traps that the Hephaestus cabin had built into his car. No, that was a stupid idea. Both the wheel spikes and the oil slick could have caused a huge accident that would have attracted a lot of unwanted attention. The SOL engine was a no-go because it wasn't fully tested. The last thing he needed to do was accidentally blow himself and his girlfriend up. He was pretty sure that Talia wouldn't love him anymore if he did that. Shifting his driver's seat forward, Naruto stepped back to let Talia out. The Ravenette stretched her arms above her head, her back releasing a few soft pops as it loosened up from sitting in the back. Talia lowered her arms with a sigh before looking at the smiling blonde. With a smirk on her face, she poked him in the chest. Next time, you're sitting in the back with the kid. Oh, am I really? Naruto asked teasingly before raising his keys up to dangle in front of her. Which of us is licensed again? Which of us could care less? Talia retorted, making a grab for her boyfriend's car keys. Naruto quickly retracted the keys and put them in his pocket, smirking as she gave him a mock pout. Patting the Ravenette on the cheek, Naruto gave her another fox-like grin and winked, just a few more practice sessions with Chiron, babe, then you can drive to your heart's content. Don't call me babe, Talia grumbled with distaste as she swatted his hand away. Naruto merely laughed and went to the trunk to get the McLean stuff out of his car. The movie star in question was waiting right there with a small amused smile at their interactions, his daughter giggling. Naruto gave her a half-smile and winked before ruffling her hair, getting an annoyed growl from the shorter and younger girl that made him chuckle. It was the small annoyances he could provide that made him feel alive. Once he had retrieved the 3 bags from his trunk and gave them out to the respective owners, Naruto and Taliya then followed Tristan into the building and went up the elevator to the top of the building to the 27th floor. The hallways were rather expensive in design, not to mention flashy like the god who apparently ran the company. As they walked past a wall of employee photos, Tristan paused and looked at the moderately larger image in the center. He looked from the photo to Naruto and then back before scratching his head. Well, that's interesting. What is? Piper asked before following her father's gaze and looking back at the blonde teen following them. She repeated this several times before furrowing her brows and asking Naruto, I thought you said you didn't have any connections in the business? I don't, Naruto replied as he stared at the picture before he clapped a hand over his eyes and sighed, I hate him sometimes. I truly do. Do you know Liar? Tristan asked curiously, a relative? Taliya, who was smirking at the whole exchange, gave her boyfriend a grin that made him want to cry. It was her mischievous grin, one that she had gotten during their few months as a couple. It showed up every now and again when he would tease one of his siblings, usually Lee and his girlfriend Katie Gardner, but sometimes it would show up when the moment was against him. This happened to be one of those times. It's his father actually, the daughter of Zeus said as Naruto hung his head. He really hated admitting that he was related to one of the most notorious womanizers in the universe, sometimes anyway. You'd be surprised when that sort of information would come in handy, not that you'd ever want to need it. Naruto was sure if his late sensei or Kakashi ever found out about one of the things his father had taught him, he'd be doomed to a life of pestering from perverts. His mother, on the other hand, would probably try to find a way to slaughter a god out of sheer feminine fury or motherly rage. Not something he wanted to happen, and also something he really wanted to try and prevent. Hence, why he kept that sort of information secret. Really? Piper exclaimed as she stared at the amused older girl and the depressed blonde standing next to her. Honest to gods, that's Whisker's dad, Taliya commented before jokingly commenting, maybe in another life I'd have hooked up with him, instead. You're hilarious, dryly commented Naruto while his mirthful girlfriend snickered. He sighed and looked at the McLean family's questioning eyes, or rather, distrustful in Piper's case, he and my mom are separated in a way. I took mom's name to stay out of the spotlight. And where did Naruto come from? Piper asked. It was then Naruto's turn to grin mischievously, something that Taliya took notice of and caused her own smirk to widen slightly. Well, I'd have thought either your dad or your school would have taught you this already, but since it's come to this I guess I have to step forward. You see, Piper, when a mommy and a daddy love each other very much they decide to have a baby. So first mommy and daddy take all their clothes off and then climb into bed. Though they could also climb into a car, onto a table, sit on a chair. Naruto's rather humorous answer was cut off by a red-faced Piper. I know that. The girl exclaimed with a blush while her father laughed along with Taliya. Huffing, the embarrassed 13-year-old rephrased your question, is your name really Naruto? Do you think I would choose a name like that willingly? The blonde retorted with an arched brow. Her argument now invalid from the point he gave, Piper gave a little snort before turning away from the now smirking blonde. Naruto shook his head, smile still in place, before looking at Taliya with a grin. The raven-haired girl nodded back, a silent agreement coming between them. We're almost at Liar's office, Tristan said once his daughter had considerably calmed down. I'm sure that the two of you have to find a place to stay, so we should get this all done now. Let's get it over with, Naruto agreed with a sigh before once again following the McLean family through the hall with Taliya at his side. Piper had gone silent, but still sent the occasional glance over her shoulder at them, her eyes changing to match both Taliya's and Naruto's unique shades whenever she met the opposite's gaze. Finally, after a walk through the ridiculously long hallway, and passing several paintings, statues, and murals of a certain deity, they arrived at a very expensive-looking door. It gleamed as though made of gold and the logo of the company was on it. As Tristan's hand lifted to knock, the door was pulled open and a familiar face to the two older demigods beamed from the other side of the room. Apollo had ditched the Konohan uniform, but still kept the face of Minato Namikaze. Now he was wearing a dark blue blazer with a white V-neck shirt underneath, and slacks that matched it. Hanging from his neck by a golden chain was a gold medallion engraved with a sun that looked almost Greek on design, but wasn't. Upon noticing the slight difference in the sun's design, Naruto stiffened slightly before looking to the sun god's eyes and inwardly moaning in dismay. Rather than the warm ocean they usually were, two almost frosty blue orbs stared back at him. Tristan McLean. I haven't seen you in ages. What brings you here? Apollo asked after briefly glancing at the two following him. The actor smiled and offered a hand, which was taken by the disguised god with a grin. Just here to tell you that I think I found the right person for Theseus' role, Tristan said before gesturing behind him, and was I surprised when I found out you already knew him? Were you? Apollo asked as his smile strained slightly before relaxing as he reclaimed his hand. He turned to the side and gestured into the office, come in and give me a minute. I was just on my way out to check on something. The McLean family entered and Talia cautiously followed them before turning to her boyfriend, who had yet to make a move. He glanced at her and nodded before returning his attention to Apollo, prompting Talia to enter the office. Apollo stepped out and shut the door behind him before facing his son. Naruto, the unnaturally calm god, greeted with a nod. Phoebus, Naruto greeted as his eyes narrowed slightly. He really didn't like the Roman side of his father sometimes. Apollo wasn't much of a warmonger, but he did become more business-oriented and serious when he became Phoebus Apollo, as Naruto dubbed this personality, not to mention having his ego inflate tenfold. When he had first met Phoebus Apollo, the two had not gotten along well. Mostly because Naruto, as a Greek descendant, was a bit laid back in comparison when it came to just about everything. Apollo, corrected the god with a frown, my name is still Apollo. You're Roman, Naruto commented as his arms crossed, and you know that some called you Phoebus to differentiate your personas. I'm sure I could convince Diana to call you that if we ever crossed paths. Smartass brat, grumbled the Roman aspect of Apollo with a scowl, why are you and Talia here? Why else? I have a quest that so happened to bring me to your doorstep, the shorter blonde said before frowning, and what's wrong with Talia-chan being here? She's my girlfriend, and she insisted on coming, but that's not the point. Whoa, wait a damn second here, the Roman sun god said with a hand raised. He looked back over his shoulder through the glass window to his right at the girl in question before looking back at the teen, you're still with her? So what if I am? Naruto asked, already dreading how this conversation was going. What are you doing, kid? Apollo asked him before knocking a few times on his slightly shorter son's head, hello. You have a goddess waiting for you. Literally. After a moment of gaping at his Roman father, Naruto asked, are you talking about Hecate? I'm talking about trivia, yes, Apollo said before grinning suggestively, there's the perks that come with being with her, the sex, the free loving, the occasional affair to liven up the bedroom. And then there's the whole immortality thing that comes along with it. I sometimes am ashamed of you, admitted the teen, getting a scowl from his father, before he scowled back and replied, and I'm not leaving Talia-chan just because there's a goddess who wants to jump me. I'm just saying there's more fish out there, the Roman god said, a goddess is just the most beneficial. There's that little Bologna girl, what was her name? Rei-chan is way too young for me. Naruto argued before adding, physically anyway. Says the 22-year-old dating a 16-year-old, countered the god with a smirk. At Naruto's growl he continued, well if you're going to be so picky why not go after Cyrene? Cyrene is like my great-great-great-great-grandniece. Exclaimed the blonde before being shushed by Apollo, who looked over his shoulder at the waiting group of three with a reassuring wave and smile as they looked at him curiously. Turning back to Naruto, Apollo began to lead the blonde away on a walk down the hall. The funny thing about those cabins is technically, none of those kids are related, Apollo explained to his son, unless they have the same mortal parent. We share the same godly parents, Naruto growled, we are brothers and sisters. Of course you are, Apollo sarcastically said, every child in the cabin of Mercury, I'm sorry, Hermes, has the same father. That's different. Naruto snapped, brushing the arm off his shoulders and glaring at the Roman, look, I know that you gods supposedly don't have DNA, but you're made up of something that makes you Apollo and not another mini Zeus or Jupiter or whatever. All of us kids, even the Romans, have that something within us. Cabins don't just represent the parents, they represent our family tree, our family bonds. Now you sound like Vesta, Apollo snorted out before continuing tiredly, the point is that you could have someone you deserve. You're more than a demigod, you are just shy of joining the ranks of immortals. Not if it means leaving behind one of the first friends I made in this world, that you brought me to without asking, by the way. Naruto growled with an accusing finger to his father, not to mention that you're suggesting the girl I like, maybe even love, is someone I shouldn't be with. She's beneath you. Apollo argued. She's Jupiter's daughter. Protested the teen. She is Greek. Apollo hissed as his eyes narrowed, a Greek. You would rather have a Greek than a Roman or a goddess. You're talking to your Greek son. Naruto pointed out through gritted teeth. You are the reincarnation of a god. The Roman Apollo said before clasping his hands onto the teen's shoulders. His appearance turned gold for a brief moment, before revealing the debatably warmer side of Apollo, the Greek aspect. His attire had changed to the tank top and jeans combo. Naruto, I forced you to take a burden you should have never bared. You deserve the best in return for what you've done so far, that's all I'm trying to say. I just want the best for you. The two remained silent before the god shook his head and his appearance became that of what it was before, the Roman aspect of the sun god in mortal disguise. Apollo shook his head and held it. Whoa, blacked out for a second there, did my Greek self say something emotionally stupid? Naruto stared at his father with furrowed brows before shaking his head. He was still angry and with good reason. His dad had just directly disapproved of a girl and then indirectly told him to follow his heart, even if that meant being with said girl. Stupid multiple personality disorder. How's about this, we agree to disagree, suggested the blonde demigod as he tried rein in his temper. Apollo shrugged, your choice. I'm just saying there's more fish out there, and you could always catch a bigger better one to eat and enjoy. Clenching his teeth, Naruto decided to change the subject before he really got pissed. Why are you using that face anyway? Aside from the fact that I can choose whatever face I want, I find it easier to conduct business with a mature face rather than one of a heartthrob teenager, commented the god before he smirked and gestured to his appearance, but I guess no matter what, you just can't change the truth. I'm a sexy mofo no matter where I come from. Humble, too, Naruto sarcastically added before he said, I thought you'd already gone through the change a few months ago during New Year's Eve. It's easier to keep an eye on the biz when you're a part of it, Apollo replied with a shrug, and let's face it, I wouldn't do anything as a Greek but read porn in the office or make pornos with myself as the star. Like you don't have someone to give you the hanky-panky on the side here, scoffed Naruto. Don't compare me with my other self. Apollo said with a frown. His grin reappeared as he quickly added, you'll only feel worse about you. There you go again with that humble trait we all share, snarked Naruto before he sighed, look, I didn't come here to argue over which side of you is the best. You're both equally annoying. McLean brought me here for a job I said I needed. And why did you say that? Apollo asked as his smile became a confused frown. I had a brief vision of McLean and his little Greek daughter appearing in front of my door, but much more clean and not as emotionally ruffled. That's partially why I said I needed a job, Naruto grunted as he pressed his two fingers to his head in an effort to stave off the coming headache. Look, Phoebus. Apollo. Whatever, Naruto grumbled before looking up, I have to get to Camp Jupiter. Today. You think that's a good idea, Fishcake? Apollo asked, using his son's own dreaded nickname in retaliation for being called Phoebus. Naruto growled at him before shaking his head. He was letting this get too personal, and he was surprised that Helios was keeping quiet for so long. It's what has to be done to save Bianca's life, sighed out the blonde after he shook off his aggravation. Alright, well I suppose I could give you a hand, Apollo said with a shrug before smirking, but you have to audition for Theseus' role. Yeah, fine, whatever, Naruto agreed readily, can I get Taliah now and go? I don't think you understood me, Naruto, Apollo said as he leaned down slightly with a grin on his face, I meant, audition. Now. You have got to be fucking kidding me. Exclaimed the blonde in disbelief. His sun-like eyes searched the slightly warmer than usual ice blue eyes that were looking at him only to find no sign of this being a joke. In fact, all that was within the icy ocean blues was the mirth Apollo found in the situation his son was in. Naruto stormed out of the building's elevator with a slightly shocked Taliah following behind him. He was livid, he was embarrassed, and he was this close to flipping his shit. Maybe that's why his portrayal of Jack Nicholson's monologue from A Few Good Men was so good it got a standing ovation. And here he was trying to not get the part just to spite his father's Roman aspect, when all that accomplished was doing just what he intended not to do. That was amazing, commented a familiar voice within his head. And where were you? Naruto all but demanded of Helios. He could see the once faded Greek god appear in front of him with his hands raised, prompting Naruto to stop walking towards his car. Talia stopped before walking into her paused boyfriend and followed his gaze, frowning when she could see nothing. Hey, I wasn't about to get us thrown out of what was one of our only chances of legitimately getting into the other camp, Helios defended himself before pointing at his incarnation. Your attitude didn't help any either. It's not like I wanted to be annoyed, but damn, he gets worse when he's in that aspect, complained the blonde. He was then elbowed in the side. Ow. Talia-chan, don't hit me. Stop talking to nothing then. And why did you stop walking? Inquired the girl with narrowed eyes. Rolling his own eyes, Naruto gestured to the slightly offended nothing and explained his actions. Helios finally decided to reveal himself and is standing there. Not for me, Talia grumbled as her arms crossed. I swear if you're making this up we're going to have issues. He's not, Q commented as he manifested between the two demigods. His eyes were squinting in Helios' direction. If you look hard enough you can see some sort of figure. And from my connection with the kit, I can hear something. It sounds like faint whispering. See? The spirit animal can confirm your sanity, Helios joked, getting Naruto to glare at him. You're not funny, grumbled the blonde, who was thoroughly annoyed at this quest's strange turn. He looked down at the medallion in his right hand that his father had given him after doing as he was requested. Apparently it would give both him and Talia a free pass, but no more than 2 would be welcomed. Peacefully, that is. There it was again. Q commented, pointing in the direction of Helios, a tiny whisper, almost human. Alright, fine, so you're not crazy, Talia said before giving her boyfriend a grin. Well, no more than usual anyway. Tapping the raven-haired girl on the nose, Naruto replied with a grin of his own. Yeah, but that's what makes me irresistible. Part of your charm? Talia joked with a smirk. Damn straight, Naruto said with a smirk of his own. Ugh, both of you go get a room, Q mocked, but be safe. Alright, that's enough out of you, said the guardian as he raised his right arm where the bracelet sat. The ruby shone while Q dissipated back into it. His spirit animal, now cowed, Naruto pointed at the manifestation of his past life who was grinning like a loon. You too. Last thing we need is the security guards wondering why. What are you smiling at? What was that? The two teens looked behind them to see the daughter of Tristan McLean staring in shock at where Q once hovered. Piper flickered her gaze between Talia and Naruto before looking past them to something outside. Her eyes noticeably widened and she screamed while pointing at something beyond the gates of the building's parking garage. What is that? Helios had vanished. Naruto and Talia turned around once again to see a giant winged serpent staring at them. A long tongue, possibly 3 feet in length, flicked out while 2 snake-like eyes narrowed on them. The couple turned and shared a look of disbelief before Naruto turned to Piper. I'll answer your questions after you answer mine. What are you doing down here, Piper? Inquired the blonde teenager while his girlfriend reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her canister of mace. Mr. Liar wanted to talk to my dad alone about a new movie idea, something about ninjas, Piper stuttered out as she stared in horror at the creature waiting beyond the gate. Why is it just sitting there? What does it want? In order of your questions, Naruto began as he stepped in front of Piper and clenched his fists. That thing you saw was my pet fox. That thing out there is a draken, Ethiopian by the wingspan. It can't come here because of my dad. And it most likely wants to eat either me or my tasty girlfriend. He sent a glare to the girl that elbowed him in the side before looking behind him at the demigoddess shaking like a leaf. He thought back to his prophecy and a smile crossed his face before chuckling with a grin. Looking forward he muttered, 3 take the fire steed neither west nor east. What? Piper and Talia asked. Naruto looked at his girlfriend with a grin. Told ya I'd meet up with my quest mates in California, he said before looking at Piper. By the way, did I mention that the 2 of us are Greek demigods? Oh, and so are you. Piper stared at him in shock while Talia roughly punched her boyfriend in the arm. Upon getting hit, the blonde glared at her with a frown on his face. Would you stop doing that? I'm not invincible, you know. Don't drop bombs like that so nonchalantly then, you idiot. Scolded the daughter of Zeus. They heard a muffled thump and looked down to the unconscious form of Piper before looking at each other once again. She's so dramatic, Naruto mock complained as he crouched down and picked the girl up in a cradling carry and light. Seriously, she's like a feather. Talia rolled her eyes before jokingly asking, where do you think she gets that from? Do you think it's alright to just leave her like this? No, we have to take her back upstairs, Naruto said, turning to the elevator. The dragon gave a bit of a roar and Naruto called over his shoulder, "Oh, shut up, we'll deal with you later." As they boarded the elevator, Talia asked, "So how did you know what kind of dragon that was?" "I like to read, remember?" Naruto said before reaching over and pressing the top floor's button while still keeping Piper in his arms. After doing so he looked down at the girl in amusement when she mumbled, "Think she's gonna forget what we said?" "Knowing your luck, no," Talia commented with a smirk as she pocketed her disguised bronzed spear. "What do you think Annie and Percy are doing right now?" "Probably something lame like arts and crafts," Naruto replied, unaware of how very incorrect he was. For at that moment in the elevator, Annabeth Chase was preparing to lead her first quest, having chosen Percy and Grover to take with her as they explored the labyrinth. After getting some control over her nerves and excitement, Annabeth started giving one of her fellow cabin mates instructions on how to properly care for Washington. Percy was trying to convince Tyson that he'd be fine, but the poor Cyclops was far too concerned to take his brother's word at face value. Grover, perhaps, was the luckiest of the three while preparing, getting a very concerned nymph to glue herself to him as they waited for the quest to begin. Chapter 6. "Well, this is all sorts of wonderful, isn't it?" Grover mumbled as they came across yet another dead end. They had only just begun their quest and the paths they had been taking were either impossible to pass or led them literally nowhere. The satyr had agreed to come along after hearing what little of the prophecy Annabeth was given that could allude to Pan. "Maze doesn't want us to pass," Tyson murmured worriedly from behind the satyr. "No, stop changing." "That'd be crazy, Tyson," Percy tried to calm his brother down with a pat on the shoulder. The concerned Cyclops came along despite Chiron's warning about the standard rule for a limit to companions. Annabeth argued that Naruto was given a quest and only took one companion, which was also frowned upon, and seeing as he couldn't divulge why Naruto had only taken one, Chiron reluctantly let it slide. "Part of me wants to pull my hair out, and the other part wants to admire Daedalus' ingenuity," Annabeth commented through a grumble as she turned around and pushed past Percy and Tyson. "Come on, let's see if a new pathway opened." The four explorers of the labyrinth backtracked to where they had originally turned only to find yet another dead end. Grover and Percy both hung their heads with a groan while Tyson started to pat against the wall in worry. Annabeth huffed in frustration before turning around and pressing her back to the new wall. Sliding down, she crossed her arms over her knees and rested her head on them. Percy went to calm Tyson down before his searching became frantic while Grover took a seat next to Annabeth. "You alright?" the satyr asked his friend. Annabeth took a deep breath before raising her head. "I really thought this was my chance to prove myself," she mumbled admittedly. A sigh escaped the blonde girl's lips before she continued, "that I was ready to be a hero." Under her breath, Annabeth added, "Just like Naruto." Though with the silence in the corridor, Percy and Grover heard it just fine. Grover rubbed her shoulder in reassurance that he believed in her while Percy frowned at what she said. His brows furrowed as he recalled a conversation he and Naruto shared last winter, and what Aphrodite had told him. However, that conversation with Aphrodite was not one he wanted to explain to his friends or brother for that matter, so he focused on what the older demigod had said to him. "When we were looking for Artemis, he mentioned that he found you first," Percy said, getting a look of surprise from Grover while Tyson listened with interest. Annabeth nodded and her gray eyes turned to Percy. "He did. I'd probably be dead if he hadn't stumbled across me." "Well, maybe not dead, but I don't know, he did most of the fighting before we met up with Talia and Luke." She gave a bitter laugh before continuing, "All I did was hide. Like a coward." "Annabeth, you were 7 years old." Grover immediately cut in before she could say anything worse about herself. "The fact that you made it from California to New York, even in a group, is amazing." "I not do as good on my own," Tyson admitted, giving his own opinion on the conversation. "Hit a lot too. Annie very brave." "You don't understand," Annabeth said with a frown to the two before looking ahead at the darkness of the labyrinth. Naruto never showed any fear, and when he fought, it was almost like a dance. A crazy, wild and unpredictable dance. "Yeah, I'll bet those clones did a lot to make it look crazy," Percy added jokingly, getting a snicker from Grover. "He didn't use them," Annabeth interjected, making the two boys look at her in disbelief. She continued softly, "He couldn't, normal people could see them. That's why he stuck with his bow." "He didn't use his sword?" Percy asked in confusion. Grover piped up before Annabeth could speak. "He didn't have it, remember? Kyubi became his sword and shield after he died." Annabeth shivered at the last memory she had before that night, forcing it back and continuing, "That's what made it even more impressive." "A bow?" some arrows, and a few irrational, no, impossible movements, and he took down monsters like he'd been doing it all his life. Percy opened his mouth to speak when Grover sent him a look that made him shut up. He may have known that Naruto had been training to be a soldier since he was a kid, but Annabeth didn't. She didn't get the story behind the enigmatic blonde, and Percy was sure that there was quite a bit left out of Naruto's story. Maybe one day they'd get the rest out of him. Annabeth continued. Since Percy didn't speak up, I asked him who he thought his parent was, wondering if there was even the slightest chance that he and I had the same mother, but he surprised me when he claimed he wondered whom his father was. He could have been a son of Athena with how amazing his planning was. He always managed to box the monsters in, finishing it quickly, and then walking away like nothing had happened. Blonde, strategies that were efficient and effective, it screamed Athena. And to think, he's the son of one of the most laid-back gods that exist, Grover added, getting Annabeth and Percy to nod while Tyson tilted his head in confusion. I just want to prove that I could do what he did, Annabeth said after another moment of silence. As the group focused on her once more, Percy's heart skipped a beat at the smile she had donned. When I watched him fight, I would think to myself, that's what a real hero is like. That's going to be me, someday. And this is it. My chance, and I blow it by getting us lost 5 minutes in. Her smile had faded and she looked down at her feet once again, making Percy furrow his brow. From what he understood, Annabeth wanted to prove that she could be a hero like Naruto, and after meeting the teen and fighting alongside him, after getting through the rough beginning they had, Percy could understand why she wanted to do that. However, like stated before, Percy had met Naruto and he wasn't as amazing as Annabeth was making him out to be. She must have him on some high pedestal and was measuring herself to him all the time. No wonder she was considering joining the Hunters last winter. Heck, Percy would too if he had an idol like that. Another thought crossed his mind that made him gain a sinking feeling in his gut. What if Annabeth compared everyone with Naruto? Where did he rank? Would he even have a rank in comparison to the blonde demigod? Percy wasn't sure if he wanted to ask or not, but thankfully he was saved from making this choice when the wall started to shift once again. The group stood close together when the ground started to shake and clouds of dust shot up. Once more standing on her feet, Annabeth made a realization: it's a platform. The platform is moving, everyone hang on to something. We're on an elevator. There was a loud hiss before the labyrinth's floor dropped the 4 screaming teenagers at an impressive speed. Their ride was fast and short, the platform settling once more with another hiss. A large open doorway was to their right and the questing quartet all got to their feet rather quickly. All in favor of not taking that ride again? Grover asked with a groan. Me. The other 3 replied with groans of their own while rubbing various portions of their body. They entered into the room hesitantly before being blown away with the strange setup. It looked like Greeks had once lived here, but had slightly changed. There was a shield with a sun engraved on it to the far right, making 3 of the quest takers think of a certain son of Apollo upon seeing it, but were shaken from their thoughts when a voice spoke. And who is that? Someone else trying to kick me out? The 4 turned to what looked like the average doorman with one major difference than any other normal person: he had 2 faces. One faced left, the other right. The left was set in a smile while the right had a frown. Both had dark golden beards that connected with their equally golden hair. The black eyes of either face were turned in their direction when the face on the left spoke as the adjacent hand rose in a wave: "Hello. Welcome to my humble abode." The 4 were too surprised by what they saw to speak, prompting the other face to open his mouth. "It figures. They're as rude as I heard they were." Regaining her voice, Annabeth stepped forward and spoke. "Sorry, we've never seen anything like you before. I'm Annabeth Chase, who are you?" "Ooh, wonderful. I was hoping you would show up soon," the left face said gleefully. "I'm your best friend." "I'm your worst enemy," the right face added with a noticeable deeper scowl on his face before they spoke in sync. "I'm Janus, the god of beginnings," the left cheerfully stated. "The god of endings," grunted out the right face. "The god of choices," the 2 faces said at once. "We've never heard of a god like you," Percy said, getting the right face to eye him. "I should figure you hadn't," Janus' right face grumbled, "but I've heard of you, Percy Jackson." "Who hasn't?" joked the left face. "The son of N. Poseidon." Janus' left face cheerfully interrupted the right. "Whatever," Janus' right face grunted before pointing at Percy. "You've made many choices. The choice to study alone after my brother offered his aid, the choice to leave your mother behind on the quest for the Master Bolt and others that I don't approve of. Ah, but he did make choices that stopped the rising of the Crooked One multiple times, the left face of Janus chimed in, but enough about him. Let's look at the leader, the daughter of Athena. Both faces' eyes locked on Annabeth, and she was forced to choose to look at one of them. Choosing the left, as it was the most welcoming and somewhat familiar, she asked, "What do you want with me?" "I want you to make a choice, of course, silly girl," Janus said with his smile widening. He gestured behind him, to 2 doors, and continued while holding his other hand up, "Behind me is 2 doors. One on the left, one on the right. Both will lead you out of the labyrinth and back on track. In my hand is a key. It will work in either door, but can only be used once." "I have to choose one of the doors?" Annabeth asked, "Is that all?" "That's all. Right or left?" "Make a choice," urged Janus. The blonde daughter of Athena took the key and looked at either door. There has to be more than just a left or right door, but what could it be? Annabeth asked herself. A troubling thought then crossed her mind and she looked to Percy. Could it mean? "What are you waiting for?" Janus' right face interrupted her thoughts with a frown. "Choose. It's not that hard." "I don't know which one to pick," Annabeth retorted. Janus' right face scowled deeper while the left face's smile fell slightly. "Choose," insisted the god. I. Annabeth stuttered out, bringing the key closer to her chest as she stepped back from the minor god. "That is enough, Janus," a stern voice said. Janus as well as the questing campers all turned to face the speaker, a woman, tall and beautiful. She was dressed in a white dress that flowed like oil on water as she gracefully approached the stunned god. Her long chocolate-brown hair was woven into a braid and gold ribbons woven within it. Brown eyes filled with disapproval had locked on Janus, making the god's dual faces swallow. "You are not welcome here, Janus. Leave," commanded the elegant woman. Janus had vanished faster than Percy had thought possible, disappearing as though he were never there. The woman sighed and turned her gaze back on the 4 teenagers. Immediately, Grover fell to his knee and bowed his head, murmuring under his breath several prayers. Tyson became very shy and looked away, unable to gaze upon her with his eye, leaving only a very surprised Annabeth and a slightly confused Percy to be the only 2 looking at her. "Hera." Annabeth stuttered out, making Percy look at her and then back at the woman before he remembered why she looked so familiar. The son of Poseidon's face fell into a frown as he recalled their last meeting. Annabeth Chase greeted the Queen of Olympus before she nodded to Percy, Perseus Jackson. "Percy," corrected the teen out of habit. He then asked rudely, "Why are you here? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth." Grover snapped out of worry before he bowed his head once more. "You may stand, Grover Underwood," Hera said to the satyr before she once more looked at the demigod. "I am here to help you, Percy Jackson." "Is that good enough a reason?" "Forgive me if I don't believe you," Percy deadpanned. "You wanted me dead last time I saw you." Hera frowned. "Not you particularly, but the other one could have been killed." "It was nothing personal." "Seemed pretty personal to me," mumbled the teen, but before anything could come of it, Annabeth spoke up. "Why are you helping us?" "Maybe I just feel like it. Maybe I have something to gain from it. Or maybe," the Queen of Olympus continued with a small smile, "I wanted to see you succeed, Annabeth Chase." While Hera was assisting the questing quartet through the labyrinth, Naruto was preparing an arrow. After they had gone back upstairs, Tristan agreed that it was alright for Piper to join them, on their way to the summer camp. Apparently, Lyra had told him that's where they were heading and Tristan wanted his daughter to make more friends, perhaps nipping her shoplifting in the bud before anything worse could happen. So, confused and concerned, Naruto and Talia resumed their original destination, though Talia did ask what Tristan meant by a summer camp only for Naruto to cut her off by promising to explain later. "I swear to Rhea, Whiskers," Talia said after rejoining him near the gates of the parking garage, "she's going to flip out if she wakes up in our car." With how she was asking questions before. "Not a chance," Naruto said with a chuckle, "and you said it yourself, with my luck she'll remember what I told her." The dragon roared once more, making the couple look at it with frowns on their faces. Talia prepared her spear and shield once more while Naruto knocked his arrow. The arrow had split into 2 prongs as soon as he released the string. It flew fast and true, striking the draken in the snout as it looked down at them. Roaring in pain, the flying serpent took to the skies and flew away, making the teens share a confused glance before looking back at the draken as it fled. That's not normal, Naruto said in a murmur as his brows furrowed in thought. Why was it here if not to fight? Maybe it thought that we would just ignore it. Talia suggested, easy prey. No, disagreed the blonde, the crooked one knows our faces too well and Drakes aren't stupid by any means. His eyes suddenly widened and a hand went to his head with a loud smack. Groaning, he put his bow away and abruptly grabbed Talia's wrist before turning around back towards his car. Talia didn't have a chance to resist, running after him in order to avoid being dragged. Whiskers. What is it? I'm an idiot, that's what. Naruto said back to her before opening the passenger door and pushing Talia towards it. Get in. We have to catch that dragon. The daughter of Zeus scrambled in the car while Naruto abused his Hiraishin to appear within it, pulling his seatbelt on while Talia shut her door. Before his girlfriend could ask what was going on, Naruto started the engine and peeled out of the parking spot, causing Talia to reach up and brace her hand against the roof of the car. Glaring at him, Talia warned, "You'd better not pull another stunt like you did earlier." I make no promises, Naruto said as his challenger sped out of the parking garage. His eyes narrowed as he relocated the flying serpent. Bingo. Wanna do me a favor? If you even say what I think you're going to say, I'm going to kill you, Talia spat. Roll down your window, he said, catching her off guard. Oh, right, Talia did as he requested, before looking back at her boyfriend with confusion on her face. Don't you have a button that does that? Needed a hand for this, Naruto said as he held his pad full of seals. Finding the one he wanted, he gave the pad to Talia and said, rip that out. Carefully. How am I supposed to be careful when you're driving like a maniac? The raven-haired girl asked him. Getting no response, she huffed and grabbed the top of the page before slowly ripping it out of place. Once she finished, Talia closed the pad and offered her boyfriend the piece of paper. Now what? My kunai case is on your duffel's side pocket, Naruto said as he made a hard right turn, earning himself a loud blare of a horn. Get one of them and wrap that around the handle. You do realize that having a window open isn't helpful, right? Talia asked before turning around and reaching for her duffel bag. Finding said pocket, Talia opened it and then swiveled her head around to glare at him. Why the hell are your knives with my underwear? I thought that was your pajama pocket. Naruto said before a grin crossed his face as he realized what that meant. Wait, you mean they actually made women boxers? That's sexy. And also very different than what you normally ow. He was kicked in the shoulder before the comment could be finished. Talia had just grabbed a knife when Piper started to wake up. Her kaleidoscopic eyes blinked several times before she focused on a grumbling Talia and felt herself moving at a fast rate. Slowly sitting up, Piper looked outside to the blurs before looking forward, seeing the still grinning Naruto at the driver's seat. Her gaze went to the creature that was flying away from them and she said, it wasn't a dream. Oh, hey, you're up. Naruto said before looking at Talia as she settled back into her seat. Now when you wrap it, use the torn side first. Alright, now what? Talia asked as she completed the task. Piper wanted to ask what was going on, but was suddenly cowed into silence as Naruto narrowly avoided driving right into an oncoming truck. Naruto then turned down a not as busy street, following the flying dragon as best as he could before it turned left where he couldn't. When I say so, throw it as hard as you can out your window, instructed her boyfriend before he made a hard left. As he drove down an abandoned alleyway, the blonde teen looked up in the rearview mirror with a twinkle in his unique eyes. Better buckle up, Piper. The girl did so as fast as she could. She had good reason to, as Naruto immediately pulled on the emergency brake and turned the wheel to the left once more when they came out of the alleyway, putting them just behind of the dragon. The flying serpent pulled its wings back with a loud hiss as it tried to make a rapid turn. Naruto floored it and followed as close as he could. Now, Talia-chan. The blonde exclaimed once he was right alongside it. Talia leaned out of her open window, the blowing wind ignoring her as though she were a part of it, before pulling her right arm back and chucking the weapon at the monster. The kunai cut through the air, piercing the hide of the dragon like it was nothing. The monster released a slight roar of pain but flew on, vanishing into the clouds. Naruto grinned in victory before looking at his girlfriend after she climbed back in. You've successfully just placed your first tracker, Talia-chan, he congratulated. Way to go. So are we going to follow it now? Talia asked. Naruto shook his head. No, we don't have time, the blonde said, much to her confusion. He smiled at her before looking forward as he drove. I'll explain on the way. For now, we should really get to our destination. Which is? Talia pried, Piper listening in out of curiosity. Camp Jupiter, Naruto said after a moment of silence, getting a displeased rumble of thunder from the sky. Rolling his window down, Naruto shouted back, "Hey, she's your daughter. You wanna argue with yourself?" "Didn't think so." Looking in the rearview mirror, Naruto asked their other passenger, "So how was your nap?" "You're demigods, and that was a dragon," Piper stated, before slapping her cheeks. "This has to be a dream, wake up, wake up." Denial is such an ugly thing, Naruto sighed out as he looked at his girlfriend. "Anything else you want to ask?" "What's Camp Jupiter?" Talia immediately asked, only for a bolt of lightning to fly down and strike near them. "What the hell was that?" "That was Raijiji trying to keep you away from the other camp," answered Naruto with a frown. "I knew you shouldn't have come, damn prophecies." "Prophecy? What you mean, like one of those horoscope things?" Piper asked from the back, having given up on trying to wake herself up. Naruto looked at her from the rearview mirror with an arched brow. "Close," Naruto said before he started to explain what a prophecy was. He then went on to answer as many questions that he could about the whole situation, save for the usual "who's my mother?" question that popped up. Talia had to interject to save her boyfriend's hide, explaining that only the gods could claim who their child was, except for the D'Angelos, who were special cases since Naruto was sent personally to protect them from danger. This led to her asking why the D'Angelos weren't with them, and Naruto explained that they were too inexperienced to go on a quest with him, and that one of them was ill with a disease no one had ever seen before. The whole conversation took just long enough for the group to come up on a gas station just a few minutes outside of Caldecott Tunnel, where Naruto said they'd have to walk through. "Do we really have to walk?" Talia asked as Naruto locked his car before slapping another one of his seals on it. Piper, noticing the strange ink as it shone, asked, "What's that?" "Yes, Talia-chan, we have to walk," Naruto said as he sealed away Talia's and Piper's bags, and that, Piper, was an avoidance seal. The seal makes the eyes of any mortals glance over it like it was never there. "What I just did was put your bags in a pocket dimension seal, something I should have done in the beginning." "How?" Piper asked. Naruto grinned and tapped the side of his nose. "Secret," he said, making the girl pout angrily. Talia rolled her eyes at her boyfriend's antics, but smiled nonetheless at the two of them interacting like siblings as they started their journey on foot. The thought made her think of Annabeth, wondering how the precious brain of their original group was doing or if Percy had made a move yet. Knowing how he was, Talia wouldn't be surprised if Annabeth had to be the one that made the first move. Her thoughts then went to Jason, the little brother she lost so long ago. She missed him every day and still wondered what had happened to him. Pushing the painfully happy memories of her little brother away, Talia snapped out of her trance when Naruto interlaced his fingers with hers. The blonde's unique sun-like eyes had looked at her in worry and she gave him a small smile as her hand squeezed around his. Talia could mope later, right now she should focus on the quest her boyfriend was on. It would help take her mind off of those sorts of things, anyway. Unbeknownst to any of the three demigods, a pair of dark eyes narrowed before the owner of said eyes raised a finger to their collar. Target found. Initiating pursuit. That's it for part 9. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.